from the song.
Yeah, I know.
I wasn't sure if you recognize it. Hello and welcome to WyzGyz Entertainment. This is your host Wyman. We've got an awesome guest today. We have the one, the only Charlie's London.
Hello.
Welcome.
How you doing?
Great. You'll never believe this. I was looking at the YouTube equivalent. Oh, you know what? Speaking of which, I got to mute it over there, I think. Yeah, there we go. It actually said there were 3 people waiting in the waiting room for the start of the stream.
Cool. That's good.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. First time I've ever seen anyone wait. Yeah, I was going to ask you how your day was today.
Yeah, I've been backwards and forwards chatting away to the Chaplin estate about one of my covers that's in the works, and one of the covers that's being worked on. Been working on bits and pieces for one of my scripts, because I've got a one-shot script that is being worked on as we speak. So there's like a mini story that's within the campaign that everybody's going to get. So I needed to write the script for that. So yeah, it's all coming together quite nicely. It's considering I've never written a script before, it seems to be coming along all right.
All right, welcome to Statistical Zero and Stencil Artist Deanne.
Hello.
How's it going, y'all? Yeah, well, that's pretty exciting. You are making progress in leaps and bounds. It's kind of unbelievable to me, because it seems like you're rocketing to stardom, which is pretty exciting. And you've like taken the bull by the horns. I'm just thinking that, well, I'm kind of like, I've got some ideas on a project of my own, but I'm kind of like lagging. And I'm like all over the place, and still in the staging of the planning stages. But you're already working on scripts and stuff, and that's so cool.
I mean, the difference, I think, though, to be fair to the situation, is that I'm not doing the drawing, so it's my side in so many ways is pretty easy, because I'm relying on historical text to create the script. I'm also I also have famous images and archives to work with. So truth be told, I've completely eliminated the problem of this is exactly what I want my character that's in my head that no one can see to look like, which is probably the biggest problem, I would say, one of the biggest problems that artists have when they're receiving a script from someone whose idea has been, in their head for many years, should we say, or that they've got this thing they really want to do. So I think that alone, I mean, he's so recognizable. You could give a 5-year-old a crayon and say, draw Charlie Chaplin, and they will draw Charlie Chaplin, and they will draw the man with a little funny moustache, a bowler hat and a cane, and funny outfit. So I'm lucky with that. What I want is, I want somewhere in between a proper good history book and the film with Robert Downey Jr. that was the 1992 film Chaplin, because it got so many things right, but it got so many things wrong. So I want to find that even balance where people who don't know the subject matter are going to be entertained. Your average comic book reader is going to be entertained, but your historian or someone that's interested enough to want to read more after they finish your comic is going to also be engaged. So that's actually probably where the hard part is for me, is finding that balance.
Right. So is it going to, all right. So it's definitely going to be a comic book, right? Or a graphic novel, perhaps?
Yeah, it's a graphic novel, so it's going to be. I'm aiming for between 48 and 60 pages. However, it will be what it will be. I want to tell the story how it needs to be told without leaving out important pieces and also not making it too convoluted. So if it ends up being 96, it ends up being 96. If it ends up being 48, it's 48. It will be however it needs to be to make sure that I do it justice.
Oh yeah, for sure. Statistical Zero says, I very much doubt there's a ComicsGater that has done more homework for her work than Charlie has. Prove me wrong.
I envy people who have an idea in their head and are fantastic artists and know their characters so well that they can just take a pen to paper and draw what they need to draw. Equally, I also envy my own position because I like the fact that I can read these books and take bits out, and I'm really, really lucky that I can just email or phone up people that I know are going to help me because I've been working around this subject for at least 10 years. So
wow.
the fact that I can just phone up Charlie Chaplin's official biographer and say, do you give me permission to use this particular idea in your book that seems to be something that you've come up with? And he goes, yeah, I'll just email you over and say that's fine in case anyone says anything, you've got it in writing. I'm in a very unique position, and I know I am, and I'm very privileged in that way. So I won't ever take that for granted. It's one of the reasons why I want to make sure I do this justice because I've got them here so I can tell you. Hang on a second. So David Robinson, his Life and Art, which is on my YouTube channel, I do a breakdown of these two books. So if people want to read them, they can read them.
I'm sorry, are you trying to show it on your...
No. I've got it in my hands. I'm just just checking something. So if you take out the bibliography and all the other bits and pieces which at the back, this book is 761 pages. And his autobiography is about 300 to 400 pages. So that's 1,000 pages of book that I want to get into a 60-page comic. Well, sort of, yeah. And I want to be able to do it in a way that doesn't leave important things out and makes people want to maybe pick those books up. Because the idea I have in my head is some people don't like reading volumes and volumes of books. They want to learn. And if it engages them enough, then they will go out and do more research. And that's what I want my comic to be. I want it to be the bridge between the films and the books that are available.
Awesome. Would you mind if your camera's working, showing us those two books that you were just describing?
I can't do that right now, but if you,
all right,
if you, anyone that's watching, if you just simply go to my YouTube channel, I do my introduction video. Is actually it talks about those two books. About the fact if you want to learn more, these are there's 4 books I recommend on there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's true.
My comic isn't going to be all of his life. My comic goes from the time when he was small to about the 1920s when he comes back to London for the first time since he's the most famous man in the world. And the reason that I've done that is simply because it's a standalone story in itself. And I didn't want to overload the reader. Okay. But the other thing as well is that I'm hoping that this book becomes 3 books because he makes 3 different trips back to London throughout his life, which are really, really important trips. They are points in his life that are poignant points in his life. So the idea is that the first book concentrates with him developing his most famous character, him shooting to stardom, the early trials and tribulations of his life, and then his return to his childhood home, triumphant and glorious. If there's not the support there for a second book, this is a nice standalone story in itself to give you the background to how he became the most famous man in the world. If it does have the scope to become the second book will be his life in the 30s when, or the sort of the 20s to the mid 30s, when he makes some of his most famous films. He has a lot of scandal in his private life. Britain enters the Second World War, and he makes The Great Dictator, which is, and he has actually a very strong, people don't realise this, he had a very good friendship with Winston Churchill. So there is there's room there, but I have to be very careful because Winston Churchill has got an estate that's very much like the Chaplin one. So I might have to do a bit of more wrangling to get get a license to use his image or whatnot.
That's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
So the first book, there's going to be a one-shot story available to everyone who backs the campaign, and it's going to be about Chaplin's friendship with Stan Laurel of Laurel and Hardy, because people don't know that they were actually friends as well, and they were on the same stages in London before they both became famous together. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they both rubbed off on each other in creating these, creating the personas on stage that they would later adopt. So the idea is I don't want to go into that too much for any reader that might not be interested. On the other hand, it's part of a story that you can't ignore in a way. And also Laurel and Hardy are big in themselves. So my plan is to create this one shot, which is it sort of concentrates from 1910 to 1914, just before Chaplin invents the tramp character, and while he's still touring around the stages of America and Britain, and their friendship and how their friendship grows to turn into the characters they adopt. So the idea is, if you're interested in that period, in between a certain pages in the book, you can read the one shot. If you're not, you just go on to the next part of the story. So that's going to be available to everybody. It's going to be called Charlie and Stan from Carno to Keystone, because Carno was Fred Carno Company, which was who they both worked for in London, and Keystone, obviously Chaplin goes on to be a Keystone cop with the Keystone Film Organisation, which is one of the biggest film companies to start out in the 1910s to do silent films. So it works out really nicely, and I've got some great people working on that as well. So yeah.
Man, that's cool. It's as though you're reading my mind, because you're answering all the questions I'm about to ask you before I get a chance to ask.
Oh, that's not intentional.
Statistical Zero says, that's a Hollywood biopic for you, about 50-50 realistic. I think that's in reference to the Robert Downey Jr. Chaplin movie.
The Robert Downey Jr. Chaplin movie is exceptional. It has had a lot of criticism, but equally it's had a lot of praise. It's the thing that it is an officially licensed film. The Chaplin estate worked tirelessly on it.
All right.
For those of people that don't know, Geraldine Chaplin, which is Charlie Chaplin's oldest daughter, she actually plays Hannah Chaplin in the film. So she plays her own grandmother in the film.
So cool.
Yeah, she plays, and for the Game of Thrones fans who are amongst us, Charlie Chaplin's daughter Geraldine in question, her daughter Una is in Game of Thrones. I think I've never watched Game of Thrones, I have to confess, but I know that she's murdered in an episode called The Red Wedding.
Oh.
So she's actually she's in Game of Thrones. She's a very strikingly beautiful girl. Her name's
right.
So they're still around doing things. It's still a legacy. It's still very much a legacy of film stars and film makers, shall we say. A lot of his grandchildren and his children still work in music, television, film.
Wow, that's impressive. I'm sorry.
That's right. His daughter Victoria, her daughter Aurelia, she is very involved in Cirque du Soleil. So they're quite a powerhouse of a family even now, and people don't realise. So yeah.
Yeah, I never would have known until you explained it.
No, people genuinely don't.
And do they still do they to this day all use their real names? You know, the Chaplin name, or is that like a stage name?
No, I think I know Una, the girl that was in Game of Thrones. She's actually, her real name is Una Castilla because her father is Spanish. But I believe she uses Una Castilla Chaplin.
Oh,
Aurelia, her surname is Thierry, and she doesn't use the Chaplin name. But she strikingly looks like she actually looks like Chaplin's mum, Hannah, which is quite so it's quite interesting because a lot of them do use the name, but then a lot of them don't. I think it's whatever they feel comfortable with, because I can understand it's not a common name and people will automatically ask you, are you related? So
yeah, that's true.
and I think that there's, you know, whereas maybe some members of the family are happy to have the connection because it will open doors, I think other ones maybe don't want to feel like all their hard work is in vain because of the surname.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was about to say too.
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked that question so many times, like, are you related? Is this why you're so bad? And I was like, no, I'm not related to him at all. Not related to him at all. I've got family connections, but not in the way of being related. My great uncle was in the same workhouse as Chaplin, so was in the same almost like, well, workhouses here, they were like orphanages that children were sent to if their parents ended up in poorhouses. So back in the Victorian times, it was actually a crime for you to go to debt, be in debt. You ended up with debtors' prisons. And before it got to that stage, many people voluntarily handed themselves into workhouses. So they were at wards of the state. So they pretty much lived in a form of prison until the state deemed that they'd be able to come out and live a functionable life. And the added issue with Charlie and his brother Sydney was their mum suffered with crippling mental health. So Hannah was actually in and out of mental institutions. Oh, and there are stories of the boys literally living on the street as a result of just having nowhere to go. And this was before there was a welfare system, before there was any real looking after children. There are stories of him just wandering around the streets at like 10, 11 years of age with nowhere to go. He actually at 14 had to commit his own mum into a mental asylum because she was completely and utterly gone. So it is incredibly sad. His story is incredibly sad, and he really is a proper rags to riches story because he literally had nothing and then become the most rich, the richest man in the world. It's incredible. It is an absolutely incredible story, and one I think we need to know more about because he's. Yeah, I think because his films are in black and white, I think a lot of people just think they're old and dusty and they don't play a part in modern life. But if you've ever heard the speech from the great dictator, it's still considered to be one of the best political speeches of the last 75 years. And the irony is it was written by a comedian, not even a politician. So it's quite, I mean, he says, I mean, and with the current situation of the world, you know, it resonates with me because he actually says, I would like to help everyone if I could, Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We don't want to hate one another, where human beings are not like that. We want to live by each other's happiness and not by each other's misery. And that's the words in that film. So you're talking about a film made in 1940. Any politician now could go into any political building around the world, say that now, and the words still resonate as much as when he wrote them in 1940. Probably more so than some of the waffle politicians are coming out with now. Go say them words in the street and see what reaction you get, because it'll probably be better than what half of them are saying at the moment.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, Stencil Artist Ian says, "You've had a haircut." Yeah, You notice.
Of him, of all the things he could say about this highly interesting show, he notices that you've got a haircut.
I know. Yeah, I'm glad to finally be rid of that extra hair because I am not a big fan of maintaining a mullet. I don't like the feel of hair brushing against the back of my neck all the time, and I sweat easily. So much hair leads to a lot of sweat.
I can appreciate that. It's not been hot here, thank goodness, but I can imagine in areas where it is hot.
We get a lot of hot and muggy weather this time of year. In the UK, is it typically overcast and rainy a lot of the year?
Yeah, really. I mean, it's been raining today. It's quite grey. We consider 21 degrees, which is what it's apparently going to be at the weekend, to be hot.
Oh.
I know. It's always really funny for me when I go on holiday anywhere hot and exotic, and it always makes me laugh how it takes me like 2 or 3 days to actually climatize myself, and I'm like, oh my god, it's so hot, but it's not really.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I was spoiled when I lived in California because the average temperature tended to be like at least the part I was living in Northern California, across from San Francisco, because we had the bay there, the average temperature was somewhere around 73, 75 most of the year. And, we didn't get extreme temperatures. It wasn't, we never saw snow. It was mainly 2 seasons, spring/summer and fall/winter. And during fall/winter, it was occasional rains and a lot of microclimates. But then if you go down south to Southern California, San Fernando Valley, Los Angeles area, a lot of their temperatures will run as high as the 90s or 100s. And, people there think we're wimps, but they're already accustomed to living in that kind of temperature regularly. Let's see. Cam says, don't undervalue haircuts at this point in time. Yeah. Some places they still haven't given permission to reopen salons, which is kind of wild. So do you all right. I like the fact that you've already got planned 3 stages, 3 campaigns, highlighting 3 unique portions of his life. Did you say that the first book is going to cover some of his early career as well?
Yeah, it's going to pretty much cover. So the plan is it's going to go through all of his keystone years when the tramp. He comes up with the idea of the tramp. Then it's going to go through the periods of him being with the S&A and the Mutual Cinema, their different film companies at the time, where he signs the different companies. There's it's also going to look slightly at the false accusation that he refused to fight in the First World War. There's going to be a slight political slant on it as well, because he was actually put up for a knighthood to become a knight of the British Empire in 1917, I think it was, and they refused him because the king at the time, George V, had pressure put on him by a man called Alfred Harmsworth. And Alfred Harmsworth owned all the big newspapers in London. And what actually happened was he was the Minister of Propaganda as well for the war. And by 1917, the war was not going well for Britain, and there was a lot of, conscription. So the draft, our version of the draft in the First World War was brought in. Chaplin didn't refuse to fight in the First World War. He was actually underweight and he was too short. He was 5'5", and he weighed 9 stone, which was very small, between 9 and 9.5 stone. So he was very slight, and he was too short to fight. And he was advised as well Oh, I think I'm on my own. I will carry on.
I'm here. I just.
Oh, you just made me big. Okay.
Yeah.
He basically he was advised to sign up for the draft, so he put his name down, and they said, like, we basically don't need you. And then during the process of about 1916, a book was written called Charlie Chaplin, His Own Story, and it was an unofficial biography, and it had a lot of rubbish in it about his early life and about him growing up and different things. For one thing, it said he was born in Fontainebleau in France when Napoleon was born. And the reason being was that Charlie used to get bored in interviews. So he was his own worst enemy in a lot of respects. He used to get bored in interviews, and he used to tell the journalists crap, basically, because he thought it was funny. Because he thought it was funny. And so this woman wrote this book collated on all these different interviews, and it was bought for a stupid amount of money. I think it was about $100,000 back in 1916 by Alfred Harmsworth to publish in the British newspapers as serialisation. Well, Charlie's older brother Sidney was his manager and said, what the hell is this? And they decided to sue, and they won the case. So Alfred Harmsworth was not allowed to publish this newspaper, this serialization, but he'd spent a lot of money on it. It's about the equivalent of about $5 million now.
Oh, wow.
So he decided he was going to somehow make this money work for him. So he started printing newspaper articles that Chaplin was a coward, how he refused to sign up to fight in the war, how innocent men were dying, how people should boycott his films. Basically, a 1916 version of cancel culture. That's pretty much what they tried to do to him. And as a result of this, because Alfred Harmsworth also controlled all the newspapers at the time, the war was going so terribly for Britain. George V needed Alfred Harmsworth on his side. He relented to pressure and didn't give Chaplin the knighthood that many people thought he deserved, because he didn't want his biggest supporter in the newspapers to turn against him. Then some years later, he was put forward for a knighthood again, and then he was refused because he'd been kicked out of America for apparently being a communist, and because we were in the height of the Cold War and America being our biggest ally, they didn't again want to fall out with someone over giving him a knighthood, so that was quashed, and he didn't receive his knighthood until the 1970s, when he would then go on and die a couple of years later. So it's quite an interesting politically fueled life for someone who really just wanted to be a comedian. And so the first book will look at his struggle through the First World War, making films, how really politically people tried to slander him, but public opinion was very much on his side. He was incredibly popular. He was loved all around the world, and I think that was where his danger was, because he actually was so popular. People thought that was dangerous, because if he suddenly got political, would the working class man start listening to him? This was where I think the whole communism thing came in, because they thought that because he had the ear of the working classes, if he suddenly decided he was going to say, let's all revolt and take over the government, people might actually listen, which was ridiculous, because all he wanted to do was make films. But he wanted to make films with a message, which is what they didn't like. So there you are.
Wow, that's pretty cool. This may be my ignorance showing. Well, actually, you got me all excited to watch the Robert Downey Jr. Charlie Chaplin movie.
Yep.
Before that ever came out, was there any other movie that came out about his life, like what is it technically called, an autobiography, when somebody else does it on you, the subject matter?
No, there wasn't, because there was still this slur for many years about him being a communist, to the point that when they were making the film with Robert Downey Jr., when they were on set in different places, people did go up to the production team and they were like, why are you making a film about this commie Charlie Chaplin? And that was the 90s. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think. My honest opinion is he wasn't a communist. It goes back to what I've said before to people on other streams and whatnot, is that our idea of communism and socialism is very different to, I think, the American idea of communism and socialism. We have three parties over here. We have the Conservatives, we have Labour, and we have the Liberal Democrats. And traditionally, how it will be is, I'm not sure which way around it is in America, but I always get confused. But the Conservatives, we say they're like the old school royalists, if you like. They agree with the old institutions. Our current Prime Minister is a Conservative. Labour is probably... Labour is pretty much what you would consider to be more left-leaning, but they're still centre-left. They're still in favour of many of the old institutions, but also their idea of supporting the working class and government-based institutions is top of their agenda. And then the Liberal Democrats, which is probably the party you guys don't, because you're a two-party system,
Right.
They sit in the middle. So what we would consider to be our middle party, the Liberal Democrats, is probably still what you would consider to be the left. So he was, by British standards, probably a Liberal Democrat. He liked the pomp and circumstance of the old system. He was very critical of the British Empire. He loved the idea of the royal family, but he equally wanted there to be a national health system. But that was at the time still too socialist for an American audience. But it's because he grew up in such a working class English, in London, that he saw both sides. I mean, he was a child during the height of the British Empire. So he saw what wealth and power you could have, but he equally saw the dregs of society where women who were once respectable, but maybe their husbands had passed away and there was no welfare system. The only thing they had of any value was their own bodies, so had to turn to prostitution. And that was a common thing of everyday London. So everyday England, really. So with all these things in mind, it's not a surprise that he had the ideas that he did about things.
This may be my ignorance coming through, but were there, in Charlie Chaplin's entire career, were there actually movies where there was audible dialogue? It sounded like The Great Dictator had speech and everything. Because I always picture him as a silent film actor.
Yes, he made the last appearance of the Tramp was a film called Modern Times, and there is even a section. He always said he didn't want the Tramp to speak, because the minute the Tramp spoke and you gave the Tramp a voice, you gave him someone's one-dimensional character of who he was. So everybody in their mind had an idea of what he sounded like, had an idea of what his personality was like, and he didn't want to rip that away from people who had grown up with it. So he decided, if I give the Tramp a voice, it's going to lose that magic for so many people. But when he realised that he had to start making different films to making the Tramp, because people were making talkies. Technicolor was becoming a thing. He didn't want to get outdated. He decided that he was going to retire the Tramp. And the Tramp speaks in Modern Times, but he actually sings a song that's complete gobbledygook called the Nonsense Song, which has no words make any sense. And then after that, he really, so the next big film he makes was The Great Dictator, and The Great Dictator is a speaky. It's a talkie. It's not a silent film, and he plays two characters in that film. It was a very brave film for him to make in 1940. He played a Jewish barber, and he played a dictator called Hinkle, who was pretty much a complete and utter rip-off of Hitler. He was making fun of Hitler. It was a satirical take at Hitler.
Okay, all right.
And years later, he said if he had known of the atrocities that were going on with the Holocaust, he would have never made that film. because he was worried it would have been seen in bad taste. But people have said that no, it needed to be made because he poked fun at Hitler, and he was even in the 30s. He was very adamant that this was a tyrant and that he couldn't be trusted, and that many people didn't agree with him. Weirdly, many people actually thought, no, you can control him. It's good that he's getting the German economy and German business back on track. We'll be able to control him. He's not that powerful. And two people who didn't agree with that was Churchill and Chaplin, and they both said, no, he's dangerous. And so one of the things Chaplin did to make fun of him was make The Great Dictator. So he made, from The Great Dictator onwards, all his films were talkies.
And
yeah.
So let's see. Statistical Zero said Limelight.
Mm-hmm. Limelight is probably one of my favourite films, and Limelight is weirdly, Limelight's going to be where my book starts, because thank you, Stato. I love him so much. So Limelight was made in 1952, and it was while Charlie was in London promoting Limelight, he found out that if he was to return to America, he had to go in front of McCarthy's Court of Un-American Activities. And he basically said, no, I'm not going to do that, because I've paid my taxes there for 40 years, and I don't see why I'm being treated this way. So he refused. He actually didn't technically get kicked out of America. He just refused to reapply for entry. So the story of my book starts with him going back to London. He knows at this time that they've been calling him a communist. He knows that there's going to be these things hanging over him, that nothing he seems to do convinces people that he's not got this horrible, sinister agenda against the American people and the American government. And Limelight is a film about a washed-up actor called Calvero, who his career is pretty much over, and he finds this young dancer called Teresa, and she's tried to commit suicide because she was a ballet dancer and she can no longer walk. So the film is actually about them discovering themselves again to become better people, and there's a lot in the film that is reminiscent of his childhood. So that my book will start with him promoting that in London, and then there's one night in question which is documented in a couple of books where there was a party in the hotel he was staying in, and he just wanted to get away from it. So he sort of made his excuses, and he left. And he went walking around London where he grew up. So I really liked that idea. I liked the fact that he was visiting all these old haunts and remembering where he came from. So I thought that'd be a really great way to have like flashback scenes. So at every point he goes to a different part of his childhood, he sees, at every part he goes to, there was a home he lived in, a school he went to, a park that he played in, even like where his mum was in the mental asylum. They are trigger points for memories. So you'll get to see his life will go into, like the story will go in two stages. It will run with his modern life in the 50s, and then going back to his life, becoming sort of that child, growing up, developing that character, becoming the tramp. And then the end of the book will be that trip back to London in the 20s. So it's like these two trips run parallel. So it's getting the audience to look at where he's been and where he's come from. And where he is then, and talking to the artist that I've been working with, we've decided that the great way to do that will have it almost like the reader is time traveling, and the best way to get that to work is all of the 1950s stuff is going to be in colour, all of the Victorian stuff with him as a child growing up in Victorian London is going to be in sepia, and then his silent film days are going to be in black and white. So the different contrast of colour and tone will give you an idea on what time period you're living through with him.
That is freaking sweet. That was yet another one of the questions I was going to ask you. That is brilliant. I love that idea. Wyatt Holiday says, "Hey guys, I just wanted to pop in and show Charlie some support. Keep rocking in the UK."
He's I the graded guys, Mandy, Pete, the graded guys being of course Optimus, Piper, Xavier, Scott, who have obviously got that fantastic book Peregrine. I get them so much love from them. The CG UK guys as well, obviously, who stencil artist Jan is one of them in the chat, but then he has to be here because he supports me regardless. And then you've got Mandy, Peter, and Wyatt. They are all of them, like, that's my little corner of CG, and I love them, and they're all so supportive. And it's just it's absolutely fantastic. I am very blessed, and I'll never take that. I'll never ever forget that with this book.
Yeah, Wyatt said, "Hey, there's part of my writing millionaire sextet stencil artist." Yeah.
and also we want to give a shout out to Cam in the chat as well, someone else who I hold in very high regard in CG. Cam has been one of them I spoke to from the very, very beginning when my journey with CG started. One of the first people I told that I really wanted to do this book. This book for me is probably, as an idea, it's been something I've been wanting to do for 5 years. As an actual realistic prospect, probably the last 18 months. And I didn't know how easy it would be because I wanted it all to be official. I wanted it to be done properly. So I applied for the license through the estate to do it. And actually, that's quite hard. It's not so easy as it might just be as like writing a letter, so to speak. But they're very good with me because I've done a lot of things with them. I know them well enough to that they know me, and we've, like I say, I've done projects and things before. Different silent film festivals and stuff. So they knew that whatever I was going to do was going to be respectful and it was going to be done in the right way. Because this is one of my heroes and I want to be able to do him justice. I feel very privileged as well that David Robinson, who I was telling you about earlier, has agreed to write the foreword for me for the comic. So Chaplin's biographer is going to write me a foreword. And he's the man that worked on the script for the Robert Downey Jr. film. That's why it's very important to me, because between David's book and Charlie's own words, that was the 2 books that made up that film. So to use those 2 books again to not only write my own script, but then have that man write that for me is incredible. And he's 90. He knew Chaplin. So that's another thing that for me is mind-blowing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the fact that he's willing to do a foreword for you, that lends a ton of credibility. Yeah,
that's what I really want for this as well is, and it's really funny. Sometimes I still sit there and I still go, oh my God, like, what if no one's interested in this? Like, what if I put it out there and it doesn't make any money or it doesn't get the interest of, but I don't, the more and more I'm getting it out there, the more and more I'm speaking to people about it. People are really excited and that's really important to me. Like, that's probably the most important thing to me.
Yeah, I think it's going to do pretty well. I don't know how well. I'm not good at predicting performance.
No, neither am I.
But I anticipate, if there's any indication based on your rise in CG, if you will.
Oh, thank you.
And as a YouTuber starting her own channel, the sky's the limit. I think you're going to do really well.
Oh, thank you.
I think loads of people, including myself, are really ultra appreciative of the fact that you do your homework, you do your research, and you want to stay true to the legacy of Charlie Chaplin and do good by his estate, and that's really important. Cam says, "Hail CG UK, awesome." Mm-hmm. Definitely, I love CG UK. They're a blast, and you're among them, of course.
Yeah.
Cam shares a little, I guess, a kiss smiley with hearts.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good guy, and I just wanted to add that I've always tried to have a very realistic expectation with this book. I've always had the idea that as long as I can get it out there and it's in my backer's hands, I'm not looking to, you know, make a stupid amount of money. It's not the financial implications of this book are not ever been something that's been on my mind. What I want is to be able to make enough I can produce it, that I can sell it, and everybody enjoys it, because I've always tried to listen to the advice of some of the creators who have done these projects. I've always as well tried to look at where a lot of other projects have gone wrong. And the one thing that I decided when I was going to do this book was I was going to put my own money away to be able to pay for whatever I needed to pay for up front, so that I will make sure this book is the best and the most successful it can be. I will make sure the quality is there. I will make sure the art is beautiful. The fact that I already know what 2 of my front covers look like. They are absolutely stunning. I have got also the incredible Billy Tucci has agreed to do a pin-up / cover for me as well. I've got Carl Stefan is doing me a print as well. Peephole Circus has agreed to do something, which I don't know yet what he's doing, but if I know Peephole, it's going to be absolutely freaking awesome. That's what I'm saying, is that there's so many people. I was watching one of Ethan's streams the other day, and he turned around and went, "Oh yeah, I'm going to draw something for Charlie's London." I was like, "What?" But, so yeah, I mean, I had actually spoken to Ethan about I'd love him to do something, but I always just thought, you know what, he's incredible and he's incredibly busy with Cyberfrog, which is a phenomenal roller coaster of a success. So I thought, you know what, as long as if he just gave me a shout out, I'd be really happy. And then the other night when he said that, when he was streaming with Billy Tucci, I nearly fell off my chair. I was like, that's incredible. And I know as well, like the likes of him and Billy, they are massive silent film fans. I mean, Billy and I are going to do a stream together looking at his book Miss Fury and looking at like Charlie Chaplin and stuff, and I can't wait to talk to him on a stream, because he loves Charlie Chaplin, and I'm so excited to see what he comes up with, because with him, he's a fan, so he's going to have his own image in his head, and I'm getting that with Donald DeLay is my other artist, and Vinny Tartamella has done me an incredible cover as well. And I've kept, and this has all been bubbling under the surface for like the last couple of months, and I haven't wanted to say anything because I wanted obviously to get them in my hands and see how they were working. But Vinny and Donald have done completely different covers. There's something literally for everybody. When I've got people like Ethan saying that to me and Billy saying that to me, I can't wait to see what these guys come up with, because it just fascinates me what is in people's minds when they think of Charlie Chaplin. So yeah, I'm incredibly excited. My mailing list opens up in 3 weeks, and everybody that signs up to the mailing list is going to get an exclusive trading card done by our very own CG UK's very own Captain Fuckhead.
Oh my god, cool!
And I've seen what he's doing. It is amazing. Cap is amazing. He doesn't ever take any compliment, so tough. I'm the one with the microphone, Cap. Take a compliment. But as long as we are both okay with it and where we want to go, I'd like for the trading cards to be a chrome trading card, because the image that he's working on would be better in chrome. And I'm not going to say no more than that, because I don't want to give the game away, because he could bless his heart, turn around and go, I'm not happy with this, I want to do something else. I'll be like, okay, so maybe that one can't be in chrome. So I'm going to say that's the work in progress at the moment, but I'm really, really excited. So the mailing list opens in 3 weeks, so about the sort of first week of July. Then the campaign is going to go live the first week in October, because my artist is currently contracted to another project, so they will start working on it from sort of the middle of September, because I want to have no less than 10 pages on my campaign. No, sorry, I want to have the 10 pages on my campaign, but I also want to have no less than about 20 to 30 pages already sort of worked on by the time I start my second 30-day rollover. I want there to be a predominant amount of this book done by the time I go into my campaign, into the demand period, because I think that that's the best way forward. If you can have at least 50% of your book done by the time you're wrapping up the first or the second part of your 30 to 60 days, you know that you're going to exceed your delivery time. And that's what I want. My plan is that I send it off to the printers about January, February, and that everybody has it in their hands by about March, April. And I want it to be by April. And this just goes to show how silly little details I have. But Chaplin's birthday is in April. So my aim is to have everybody have that book in their hands by the 16th of April, which was his birthday.
Oh.
So,
and you really thought this through. This is awesome.
Yeah. Well, being in lockdown, you have plenty of time to think about things, right? So saying that though, I go to work on the train, I'll be thinking about this book. I'll be on lunch, I'll be thinking about this book. I'll suddenly randomly turn to Jan and we're having a conversation about something else. And I go, I've been thinking on this particular page of my book, and he'll be like, yeah. So it's always there. I'm always thinking about it.
Right. I'm just taking notes too on other things I was going to ask. Welcome, Fate Salvation. He says, hi, hey, everyone.
Hey.
Statistical Zero. I'm aiming to be one of the first 50 to sign on to the email list for the book, if not one of the first 10.
Oh, thank you, Stato. Yeah, he's been a massive support. Stato is he's a great little artist as well. Like, absolutely fantastic. Like, his little comic strips, I adore them. He's done some great ones of Jan and I, me with the very Chaplin-esque. And fingers crossed, I'm talking to him about something on my campaign as well, because I'm very much, I want to reward and say thank you to the community for everything they've done for me. So I wanted to try and get as many great people from the community to have a part in this. Because it's like a payback for them, because they have supported me. Because it is an unusual thing to want to do a comic book like this. You know, most of the comic books in CG have got a superhero vibe to them of some degree or another.
Sure.
And you might say that Chaplin is a hero, but he didn't have any super magical powers, and I'm not going to suddenly start making it that he did. So I think there's a huge human story in there, and I think as well different things that how we found CG. It's so much about Charlie that is a original CG story. When he was exiled for his political beliefs, there was various scandals around him that some of them were his fault. He was incredibly silly. Other ones were not his fault. A lot of the time he showed his humility and his humanity a little bit more than maybe he should have done. He didn't understand the point that sometimes you just need to keep quiet and wave. He was very vocal about things that he did and didn't believe in. Immigration in the 1920s was one of them, which got him in a lot of hot water. He didn't. The communist thing also started because he donated to Russia during the First World War, I think it was. Because Second World War. He donated to the Russian army in the Second World War because he thought that their troops were massively underfunded. So he donated, and actually he did send to their war effort in the First World War as well. And the people thought that because he was doing that, he had a communist agenda. So there's a lot. He did a lot of silly things. But the thing that made me think that he's really CG is that, well, he would have been CG, possibly. Oh. We still there?
Yeah. I was gonna, while you were talking, I was gonna try and sneak away to refill my coffee cup.
Oh, you can do that. I'm sure I can carry on talking to the guys. It's not a problem.
Yeah, it was. Let's see. So, Cam says, indeed, Mayfield Jukes, welcome. Mayfield says Cam's the man.
Yep.
Statistical says, you want a great watch? Go find Golf Antics on YouTube. It's like an Expendables of silent comedy stars. It's almost like 9 minutes.
Yeah. The other great one to watch is Show People. And I always forget the name of the actress that's in this. But Show People was pretty much like a who's who of Hollywood. And you actually see, and people didn't recognise him, you actually see Chaplin in that film as himself, and people didn't realise it was him because they were just used to seeing him as the tramp. That's very good. I mean, a lot of early, like Golf Antics is an incredible film. And the great thing about these shorts is they're no longer than about 15. Well, the longest one's about 30 minutes, but they roughly go between 9 and 30 minutes. So they are great to just have in the background, really, and just enjoy. And I guarantee that people will watch them, and people will see where other comedians have got ideas from. One of the biggest Charlie Chaplin fans is actually Jackie Chan, and Jackie Chan actually used a lot of slapstick incorporated with his own form of martial arts.
Yeah, for sure.
So in the strangest of places, Chaplin influenced people. Definitely.
Yeah, I love Jackie Chan. These shorts, were they similar to movie trailers where they were played before you went to see a theatrical movie?
No, because back then the most that they could, all the films were done on reels. So the most at one time a film reel could hold was between 15 to 20 minutes.
Oh.
And then they did manage to adapt it to being about 30 minutes. And then obviously they developed new technology where they could have a whole film on a whole reel. But back when Chaplin was making his Keystone films, for example, the average sort of 10 to 15 minute Keystone film would be they'd be called one reelers. So that would be all you'd get on a reel. If you look up posters of his film The Kid, which was his biggest, like 1921 it came out, it was his blockbuster, it was his big film. It's the advertising poster actually says 6 reels of joy, because the film was an hour long. It was the highest definition of the time, and it was still 6 reels. So they had to change the reel every 10 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
So it's not like, so it's almost like the best thing I can think of is when you change over, it used to change over a tape or a vinyl. It's the same sort of process, really. So yeah.
The days of the reels.
Yeah, so and again, one of the reasons why his films still exist and they're in such high definition is because he didn't film on nitrate, he filmed on celluloid. And nitrate had a horrible habit of combusting if it got to be too hot. So you would find whole movie theatres just burning down because they'd accidentally put these reels by a radiator or a fire, even in some cases by a kettle, and it's just gone and just exploded. He didn't film on nitrate, he filmed on celluloid, and celluloid is also a lot easier now to restore, which is why you will find a lot of his films are now, well, I've got them, 2 of his box sets on Blu-ray, because they can be restored to be, I mean, I watched the Blu-ray of The Kid the other day, and I can't believe that film is 99 years old. It's insane. I mean, you watch his film about the First World War shoulder arms, which is very funny. That's over 100 years old, and it looks like it's been made yesterday. It's crazy how they've been able to do this stuff. But wow. a lot of these films are lost, or the quality's really bad, or I would say don't ever buy these films from like the DVD shops or Amazon and whatever when they're the cheap sets, because you're not going to get the quality. The speed is wrong, the music is terrible, the imagery is awful. get them when they're officially licensed, because yes, you'll pay a little bit more, but you'll benefit from it. There's no point in watching one of these films that is in itself a historical document, watching it with really bad quality.
So be on the lookout for the discs, DVD or Blu-ray that specifically say that it's officially licensed.
Yeah, so in America it'll be Criterion or Park Circus, I believe. Here it's the same, but you will know because the box sets in themselves will look like they'll look like the money's been spent on packaging. You will know, and they're not even incredibly expensive. I mean, I think the complete set of his films that he made himself are it's about between $40 and $60 on Blu-ray. So, and I think that's about 12 films in there, including all the extras and so on. And it's actually really good quality. Stato's just said Kino does some of the best restorations they do. This is where it's interesting because we have different places over here that restore them to who restores them in the States. But overall, it is the Chaplin estate that owns the license for anything made after 1918. So all of his individual films that he made at the Chaplin Studios in Los Angeles, they are all owned by the Chaplin estate. And yeah, Criterion, they are, if you're in doubt, look for anything that's got David Robinson doing an introduction to it, because he does all the official stuff. And if you want to know what he's like, just type in on YouTube David Robinson the Kid introduction, because the Park Circus set that I have, which I still consider to be one of the best ones, he done the introduction for every single one of the films, so the story behind it. And yeah, that I can't praise that man enough. He's a legend in himself, just the work that he's done.
Sweet. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Statistical says Chan used a lot of Chaplin and Keaton ideas. It was great. One thing I liked about Jackie Chan is like he would do. It was said that he would, he studied well. He actually was in a movie or two with Bruce Lee. Mm-hmm. And he would study Bruce Lee's art style. Excuse me. And I don't remember if he specifically said it, but it said that like when he was studying Bruce Lee's style, if he would like do the opposite of Bruce. So if Bruce kicked high, then he would kick low and things like that. Okay. And what I also liked about Jackie's movies is that, he made it feel more down to earth and realistic. Like it's really cool to see, giant mobs of people attack the protagonist and then him kicking their butts. But if Jackie Chan hits something really hard, like a refrigerator door or something, he makes it clear that it hurts. And he did so many of his own stuff. He did the vast majority of his own stunts for many, many years.
Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin did pretty much all of their own stunts as well. And that's another thing. People think that there was this massive rivalry and that they actually didn't like each other, which is not true. They were actually friends, and they did get on very well. And they didn't used to steal each other's ideas. They used to play this silly game where, Charlie might do a joke with a wine glass, for example, and then Buster would go and do it and add something on it, and then Charlie would regain it by doing exactly the same thing, adding something on it, and then he'd add something on it. And there was many a times when Buster Keaton made really silly business decisions, and Charlie tried to talk him out of it, and he didn't listen. One of them was his contract with MGM, which pretty much destroys his career. So it is very interesting. I have a huge amount of love and respect for Buster Keaton, because I feel that in some ways, he was probably, if you could combine them, it would have been the perfect entertainer, because where Chaplin's work was a lot more philosophical. You could see there was a lot more of the writing and the dynamics and the ideas behind the stories. Buster Keaton was much more mechanical and much more where Chaplin's more theatrical, Buster Keaton was much more action. So, you know, there's a whole famous scene of him standing there and the building falls on top of him, but he actually famously goes through the window, so he's completely unscathed. He was he had a mechanical mind. He would plan these particular sketches looking at it by the way of thinking like an engineer, whereas Chaplin would think about the emotional roller coaster the audience would be on, both the highs and lows. So I think if you could combine the two, they were they would have been an incredible force of one entertainer. The one that I always find quite funny is Harold Lloyd, because Harold Lloyd, who's quite famous for hanging off the clock, he excuse me, he actually he was almost, how can I put this? So if you imagine you've got a group like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, right? And then someone else wants to put another group together that is just as good or successful, but they are completely manufactured and engineered, a little bit like the Monkees. That was Harold Lloyd. Harold Lloyd was picked because he was good looking. He was picked because he showed some skill in being funny and dynamic and all those things. But essentially, all his gags were written for him. All his clothes were picked for him. His leading ladies were picked for him. The films were written, like the storylines were crafted for him. He was just there to do the films and actually make them look good. He was there to come for one particular film house to compete with Chaplin and Keaton. And that's quite evident in his career as well, because he's the only one that sustained a serious injury. And after that did have in some parts a stunt double, because he was meant to do this scene with a grenade. And because he hadn't meticulously planned the scene, as in he had someone do it for him, whereas Chaplin and Keaton would plan everything to the point that they outplanned it. You know, they planned it to be boring, so to speak. He didn't let the grenade go off in time, and he actually blew 3 of his 5 fingers off.
Whoa, they used real grenades?
Yeah, they used high voltage pyrotechnics, shall we say, that was definitely not something they'd use now for health and safety. And a lot of his later films, he's wearing a specially made glove that's actually got 3 fake fingers in it, because he lost the 3. His sort of, was it 2 or 3? But he lost, like, he basically had like his first finger, his little finger, and his thumb, I think it was. So he had 2 fingers.
Oh damn! I just assumed that they would have like carved out of wood, like out of balsa wood or something, some kind of fake-looking grenade, just enough to trick you on film, but in reality, just be completely safe for the actors. Wow.
Yeah. Can I just address Mayfield Dukes has said, I recall UCLA put a lot of effort into transferring their old nitrate films into other mediums in the 90s, if you remember. Yes, they did. Sadly, some of them got lost in the process, because if you spin nitrate too quickly through the restoration process, it can again burn because of friction. Some of them didn't also survive long enough for that to happen. And then, yeah, so there's thousands of silent films that have been lost. The one that I would love to see, which is not a silent comedy, it's a silent horror by Lon Chaney, called London After Midnight. It's meant to have been based on Jack the Ripper, but there's no copy that they know of that survives. People are still looking for it. There's probably a copy somewhere in someone's attic or someone's basement, somewhere in the world. And the sad thing is, if you don't start finding them, they're going to start degrading even further down. And the other thing is, Statistical Zero said, I would argue Stan Laurel was arguably the biggest idea man style writer of the bunch. Yes, because as hopefully this is going to come through on the one shot that I'm writing, he and Chaplin used to bounce these things off each other, and in some respects he was definitely more of a gag and ideas man. You can see that with the things he does with Stan Laurel. With Oliver Hardy, because Oliver Hardy is the funny man the straight man to Stan Laurel's funny man. And writing the funny man, is really, really hard. It's so probably, I would say it's easier to be the straight man than it is to be the funny man.
Yeah, I'm so far behind on chat. Thanks for getting things back on track here. Mayfield said, I like the birthday tribute, delivery goal. However, I also hope it doesn't add too much pressure. Creative endeavors sometimes require fine-tuning near the finish line. Regarding that, I was going to say, I think I heard you say that one of your goals is to ensure that you are sufficiently prepared whereby you can have a good 4,000 to 6,000 pounds set aside before the campaign even begins to dedicate on this project. And it sounds like you are taking every trick in the book from CG creators who have come before us, and it's really respectable and inspirational that you are taking to heart all these suggestions.
Yeah,
I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, because I say it so many times. I've said it so many times on streams that I often sit and watch people like John Maylan and Archie Bear and, of course, Ethan, and I will watch them, and I will watch them with a notebook, because when they give advice, you need to listen, because they've been around for a long time. You know, at the end of the day, you might not be creating a comic like theirs, but the fundamental principles are the same. You know, it's like the foundations of every house will be the same, even though your final product won't look that way. And I think that that's what's really, really important. The bottom line is as well, this is a crowdfunding project. So as much as like I have to show different things to the Chaplin estate for them to okay as I go along on the process, from my knowledge, they know very little about the comic book process. So unless I do humbly listen to people in CG that have done this for many years before me, I'm not going to have a successful project. I am a historian. I'd like to think I'm a pretty decent writer, but a comic book creator I am not. So when someone gives me advice, I always make sure that I listen, because I think that's the most important thing. Do not have too much pride that if someone says, no, this isn't good, do it again, that you get angry with the advice given. I have written so many different drafts of one particular chapter or another chapter, and if I've shown it to anyone, they've gone, this doesn't quite work, that as far as I'm concerned, my pride is out the window. As long as I get this project out and it is exactly what it needs to be, I will do everything I can to do that.
Right, absolutely. Statistical said earlier, MGM lost a lot of films in a huge fire because of nitrate. Do you think what percentage do you think of the original films on reels that the estate of Charlie Chaplin might still have?
100%.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. This is why to me,
because
they had everything that he made while he had his own studio. They also have pretty much everything. The Keystone Mutual and SNA companies that had films on that he made, that will vary. It will be about 75% for two reasons. One, I'll say about 80%, because everything that he appeared in, when you look at his filmography, is available. It's been restored, it's out there, it's available. If he was in any shorts that were then disposed of on the cutting room floor, that's going to be a different situation. He actually became so obsessive with his own license, hence why you have to go through an estate in the first place now, is because in the very early days, when he left, I think it was when he left SNA, but I'm not entirely sure. I will double check before once I've finished his story, and I'll let you know. But he left one of his movie houses to go and work with another because it was a better contract, and they still had reels and reels of outtakes. Now, back in those days, it wasn't like now. You literally cut a piece of film and stuck it to another piece of film and then run it through the projector. So what all of a sudden he received a telegram from his brother saying that, when did you bring this film out and didn't discuss it with me? And his first opportunity, he spoke to him and said, I haven't brought any film out without you speaking to me. What are you talking about? And it turns out that because they still had all these old reels of him, and because they wanted to carry on making money, and there was no such thing back then as a copyright of personality or whatever. If you were signed to a contract to a film studio, everything they owned of yours was theirs. So they were bringing out new Charlie Chaplin films that were old reels stuck together. So he had no way of stopping them doing that. So they were coming up with these films that were not even things that he'd been on set for. So you remember, I think it was last year when they were going to bring out the second Suicide Squad, and they said that with all the outtake footage they had of Jared Leto's Joker, they were just going to put him in the new one. And then they decided against it, or I'm not quite sure what is happening, but that was the talk. It's pretty much the same. They made all these 10-minute short reels, and I haven't agreed to any of these. So there was a bit of legal wrangling, and they stopped making them. But from that point on, if you watch a Chaplin film after about 1916, you'll see that he signs the beginning of every film. He actually takes a piece of chalk to a board and signs his name, because if it didn't have that stamp of approval, he could technically sue the film companies for using his image without permission.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So does the signature come out at all in the actual video footage? You know.
Yeah, it's on the beginning. On the beginning, pretty much most of his films.
So you actually see it there too. Wow. Cool.
Yeah, he writes it. And the other interesting thing about that is he was left-handed, but when you see him write on the film, he's writing with his right hand, because he tried to write it with his left as he was filming, and because he was going across the page in the wrong way, he was smudging the chalk. So he actually trained himself solidly for 48 hours to write his signature with his right hand so he could do this. So that's another level of dedication.
Yeah, for sure. Adapting. That's definitely adapting.
And talking to you here, I'm sitting here thinking, my God, you actually know too much about Charlie Chaplin. I didn't realise it was quite an obsession. And I'll say that and everyone will go, really? You didn't realise you were this much about Charlie Chaplin? No, not at all.
Another resource for Charlie Chaplin history.
Yeah, I mean, there's a running joke in my school, because I'm a history teacher. How many times can Miss talk about Charlie Chaplin in a week? They play this game with me going, oh, Mrs. Charlie Chaplin got anything to do with the plague? No, but come back to me next week and I'll find you something. So yeah, it's quite funny. It's all good. It's all in good humour.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let me read that one real quick. Mayfield says, yes, I remember now the UCLA story was about that, how they were racing against time and technology to preserve what they could before it was too late. Yeah.
This isn't Chaplin related, but it's silent film related, because it seems that Mayfield and I know Stato are very interested in just silent films in general. But there is another great man that you should look up called Kevin Brownlow. Kevin Brownlow made a TV series in the 80s called The Unseen Chaplin, The Unknown Chaplin. It's The Unknown Chaplin.
Oh.
And it's all reels that were not used in the films, and sort of private sort of home cinema and things, and it gives you another look at him. Now, he and David Robinson are friends. I know both of them. They're both incredible, and they've worked on many things together. I've seen them give presentations together. It's just phenomenal to see these two people at work. And Kevin he's actually won an Oscar for film restoration. And one of the films that he's restored was a very early production of Napoleon. Now, this film took him, I think it was between 20 and 30 years to restore, because he literally was going around collecting individual film cells in order to repair this film. The final film, with sort of intervals, I think is over 3 hours long. It's a long film. It details like the life of Napoleon. And from my understanding, he was going to like yard sales, and when buildings had been repossessed that had films in them, he was sorting through all these reels trying to find this stuff. And it's been a real labour of love, but that was all done as a race against time, because these things are not going to be there for very long. It's why, as much as it's quite daunting and sometimes nerve-wracking having to deal with an estate as much as I have had to, who I respect incredibly, I appreciate their role, because without them, Chaplin may not be here now. And that is, I think, more important, is keeping that memory and that story alive, because we do live in a time where I think we do need genuine heroes to look up to, people who have had hard lives and faced a lot of adversity and go on and become these incredible people. And, okay, you can't put it all down to luck. There was an immense amount of talent there. The man was a genius, but it doesn't, you could be the biggest genius in the world, but if you don't get the breaks, you're just going to be another face in the crowd. And I think that there was some luck, there was some divine intervention at times, and there definitely was a lot of talent. And I think that that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't deny talent. Statistical said London After Midnight was remade, Mark of the Vampire.
Yes, it was. It wasn't, I'd like to say it wasn't as good as what London After Midnight was meant to have been, but I've never seen it, which is quite sad. I'd love to have seen it. Maybe we will find a reel one day, but Lon Chaney was phenomenal. I mean, I quite like my silent horror as well as my silent comedy. Nosferatu, films like that. They're insanely incredible films.
Those titles of films that are known to be missing. Have you ever spent some time and done searches on eBay and Amazon just to see, out of curiosity, if anything came up?
Yes, but what they normally are is documentaries on them. So sadly, not really very much. I very much doubt that little old me in a flat in London is ever going to stumble across a Lon Chaney Lost film. But you never know. You never know. I never thought when I started my Chaplin journey that I'd be mixing with some great people in the comic book industry and bringing out a book about him. So life has a funny way of teaching you a lot of lessons.
Oh, for sure.
I'm very proud of.
Oh yeah, definitely. You touched on it earlier. How did you end up becoming a script writer? I mean, is it something that you said that you consider yourself a pretty good writer? Script writing, if I understand, is like a slightly different talent, a different way of writing. Did you read books on how to do script writing, or was it like a natural talent?
Well, I kind of don't know to this day if the way that I'm writing the script is the way that other people write their script. I've never had any formal training on it, but I put together the way that, for example, I write the dialogue and what the characters should be doing in each on each page, and if I can narrow it down each panel, and then I add pictures from the actual archives, which I have access to, pictures of what he looks like at this time in his life. This particular part is captured on film. Here's a link to the page that's got the news footage, all these sorts of things. And then whenever I've sent it to the artist I'm working with, he has said, this is fine, I can work with this. So, but again, it goes back to what I said about I'm in a unique situation because the person I'm writing a book about is real. So if I was creating a story from scratch, and there's some other ideas for things I'd like to do in the future, if I was able to write other comics of stories that I've invented myself, I'd have to do the script writing in the conventional way, because I know that I've got to follow a tried and tested medium. when I say I'm a pretty decent writer, I mean in the fact of the dialogue that I've created for the characters seems to have been quite historically on point for the way that they spoke. The way that I want to tell the story and the sort of emotion in which it's going, I've had some really positive feedback. And I've been writing for years because where I am a teacher and I'm also an academic, I've written various different articles, historical papers, all sorts of things on many different historical topics. So I'm okay at getting my thoughts on paper. It's just that even down to this, every day is a learning experience because I do still have to follow some of the traditional methods of writing a comic.
Now, being the story writer, have you actually already written the entire story across the 3 books?
No. I've written probably about 50-60% of the first one, purely down to the fact of I don't want to go cruising ahead and then the artist that I'm working with suddenly says to me, this particular thing isn't going to work, so we need to think of a way to change it. And then the problem I've gone is where I've steamrolled ahead and I've got this particular end goal in mind. It's not going to fit with the way we're going. So what I'm doing is I've sort of stopped at the 50% mark till we actually start the comic. And then when I start getting my pages through and I can see that it's working in exactly the way I want it to work, I can then know that how the artist is interpreting my script. I can then carry on. So it's going to be a constant working process. So at the moment, it's just really trying to decide how I'm going to be putting my campaign together and putting my mailing list together. That's the next priority for me.
Right. Now, I don't know if this is really called the mechanics of it, but the way you're writing the book, is it going to be kind of like it's an internal dialogue, like as though you're viewing everything that's happening on the pages through the eyes of Charlie Chaplin, or is it going to be kind of like from a third person perspective, seeing Charlie interact with other people on the page and Charlie having his own speech bubbles and things like that?
It's going to be mostly like that. I mean, it's going to be, like I said, I'm using these 2 books as my Bibles, if you like, for writing the script. So the plan is to have a lot of his dialogue comes from his autobiography and a lot of the narrative come from David Robinson's biography. The reason being for this is that David Robinson's book is incredibly and insanely meticulous. Charlie did brush over certain parts of his life for whatever reason. In his autobiography, he left massive chunks out. For example, he was incredibly close to his lead cameraman, Rolly Tovereau. Rolly Tovereau is not mentioned in that book once. Buster Keaton is not mentioned in that book once. He brushes over his relationship with Stan Laurel. And many people have said it's because he was egotistical and he didn't want to talk about anyone but himself. I don't think that's true. What I think that is because he was a fiercely private person and he'd had his private life splattered over every tabloid in the 1920s and the 1930s. And I think that he was worried that when everything in the 60s had started to settle down for him, when he brought out my autobiography, which is what it's called, I think he was worried that if he spoke too much about certain people, he was going to be dragging their name through things. And I think he was genuinely still worried because there was the communist slur of, did people want their name attached to him? So I think that he was very careful. He didn't talk about Rolly Tovereau, his cameraman, not because they had a fallout or there was any bad blood. It was because he didn't talk about any of the film process in general in his books, because he was sure that people would find the nuts and bolts of making films to be boring, and he didn't want people to lose interest and lose the magic of the films. So I was very conscious of this when putting the dialogue together, because I knew that there were going to be areas that I was going to find more in David's book than I was going to find in Charlie's own words. So in cases like that, you have to go to a third resource sometimes. But I'll be honest, with how comprehensive David's book is, I don't need to. It is all there. And if there's something that you're not sure of, you can always look at the back where he's got a meticulous bibliography and reference points where you can go and look for the other documentation if you need it.
Wow.
So,
that's an amazing resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm one of those types of people who is actually interested in the behind the scenes kind of stuff. So whenever I come across like a DVD or Blu-ray that has deleted scenes, hot takes, outtakes, I really dig that kind of stuff. Production drawings, things like what is it? Thumbnails.
Yeah, storyboarding.
Yeah, storyboards. Yeah, that's the term I was looking for, but couldn't get out of my mouth. How did you end up connecting with the artists that you got to work on your project? I mean, was it one of those things where you actively seeked out these people, or did these artists learn about the project you were working on and go, hey, that's something I'd be interested in working on?
There was a couple of artists within CG that I really wanted, but they were all working on other projects. So initially, I really wanted as well I approached some guys within CG UK, and even a couple of guys in CG UK that I asked had massive projects they were working on at the time. So I was a little bit, I knew exactly what I wanted in my head. I knew exactly the style that I wanted. So I was quite careful with who I thought about. And I also had to, when I found certain artists that I thought worked, I had to then approach the Chaplin estate with some of their portfolio. And I had to get a specific artist okay. The artist that I've actually gone with, he's not CG, but he comes highly recommended by Carl Stefan of Mary Boys, who obviously is CG. So I feel really confident in that he's going to be able to deliver this vision. He is insanely talented. And from the incredible work that Carl does, if Carl was recommending someone, know they're going to be like up there. So I was, I'm very, very confident in the fact that this is going to be a really beautifully constructed book. I think it doesn't matter that the artist is not CG, because the sad thing is with my project in a lot of respects is not CG, because it's an officially licensed product, so it can't be anything other than a Chaplin book, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm not, and that doesn't mean that I won't be paying a lot of respect and homage and love to the community, because I am part of the community.
Right.
So it's going to be a very interesting sort of way of marketing it, because I know that there are people within the community that they only buy CG, and so it will be sad if they don't deem my project to be CG enough, shall we say. But at the same time, I think it's really, really important that when you market a book and you bring a book out, that you make it so that it can be for everybody. And I think that this will attract the silent film crowd, and this will attract them, or maybe will attract them into CG, and they'll see the other fantastic books that are on offer. And I think that's equally as important.
Yeah. I think I would consider your book CG, because it's all, in my view, it's all about releasing great books that have good story, that have great artwork, and it's crowdfunded, not going through the mainstream avenues, which are all but dead now. Mm-hmm. And lifting people up to success, and it's all about supporting one another. And I definitely, even though yours is licensed, I think it just has more credibility. It's a solid property, and I feel the same way about Richard C. Myers' book, Expendables. He somehow secured the license to work with Stallone's property, Sylvester Stallone's property, and that's freaking impressive. So we got the Expendables, and now we got Charlie Chaplin, and man, that's totally cool.
Yeah, I've always said that in my heart, this project is going to be, it's going to be for the community. And I think, yeah, exactly what Cam said, core premises of CG is to provide entertainment for everyone. But that's exactly how I feel. You know, at the end of the day, you might get somebody who's never paid any attention to Chaplin at all, but has bought, you know, he or she has only ever really bought high action books, but there's something about this one that engages them, and so they buy it and they really enjoy it. And that's to me, that is important. It's not actually I think it's about telling good stories, and I think it's about promoting those good stories. And you know, I am very thankful to the Chaplin estate that they have given me this license and they've allowed me to crowdfund it, which means I will have a certain level of control. And I also think they're giving me a certain level of control because they know I'm going to make something that's highly respectful and it's not going to be anything they need to worry about. So, and that comes with building up trust, building up a good relationship. And that's exactly what I want to have with my customers, building up a good relationship, producing what I think that they want and what I think that they deserve, and then giving them a book that they will be able to look at over and over again and enjoy it over and over again.
Most definitely. I've got a number of other questions, but they might be kind of out of order because I was just throwing things down, notating them as they came to mind. You were talking about having, is it 2 covers already?
I've got 2 covers already. The plan is to have 3 and some prints, and there will be that trading card. It will be and there will be various stretch goals during the campaign. So the one thing that definite from the beginning that everybody will get will be that one shot about Chaplin and his relationship with Stan Laurel. Everybody will get that. That's not going to be an unlocked perk. There will be different things that will be unlocked perks that I will become sort of evident as the campaign goes on. But I do have some quite exciting things that will be on this campaign.
Wow, nice. Now I know this is going to be a silly question, but do you anticipate releasing either as a stretch goal or as a tier, a manga-based cover, a manga?
It's really funny you asked that, because when I showed the initial sketches of the Donald DeLay cover to the Chaplins, they said that they thought the style that was panning out was quite manga. To be interesting to see if that's actually where it goes. But yes, I suppose yes and no. If that's how that goes, that'd be brilliant. But the book, I wouldn't want to mislead anybody, because it's not.
Right.
It's not going to be a manga book, and there's not going to be. There's not going to sort of be any content in that way for it.
Right, like gigantic Charlie Chaplin eyes that are glittering. And everything.
That has been done, and they are actually very cute.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, there has been things like that. So you never know, but it just depends. It depends. I mean, there's certain things in the campaign I'm not sure about yet. Certain things that I want to do. Hopefully, I'll be able to do. So it's it's just seeing where the chips, where the chips fall, I think it's saying, or where the cards fall. I'll never remember, but where everything lands, I'll see where we go.
Where the fish and chips land.
Where the fish and chips fall. Yeah.
Mayfield says, "I've got an appointment. I'll catch the rest on the replay. Thanks for interviewing Charlie, WyzGyz. I'm sub now." Thank you so much, Mayfield.
I am going to have to go very soon, only because it's like 8:45 here.
Uh-oh.
So
how much time do you reckon you have?
Probably about 10-15 minutes.
All right, let me try and slam out the rest of the questions. So there, identifying myself as both CG ComicsGate and FM Fandom Menace. I have a strong love of the franchise Star Wars. And as you may be familiar with, it's based on what they call a hero's journey. A story where you learn about the protagonist. They are like in the beginner stages, and then they're taking on an adventure. And then you've got a second section of the story in the middle, which is like The Empire Strikes Back, whereby they encounter friction and challenges that test their mettle. And then the third section, or Return of the Jedi, where they learn their lessons and become stronger for it. I was wondering if I could make any kind of parallels between that story structure and your plan for the 3 books, but I'm not thinking that is going to be the case, but you can tell me if I'm wrong, or because it sounds like, based on your setup, you're breaking up the 3 books based on portions of his life, monumental moments that made Charlie Chaplin the man he is. Like different stages of his career. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So it's not so much going through the whole the hero's journey, if you will.
Yes and no, because in the first book he is very much treated a lot as the conquering hero, especially when he comes back to London in 1921, and then in the 20s right through to the 30s he's quite vilified, and then sort of the very last book, which will sort of again it'll almost do a circle, return into the 50s, and then the 50s to the 70s, when he doesn't only get his knighthood so he becomes Sir Charlie Chaplin, but he also is given a lifetime achievement award at the Oscars, which to this day has the longest standing ovation of 12 minutes.
Whoa.
So
it's well deserved.
so that in itself is a hero's welcome, is the story of the hero, is the and I think that, so there is different stages. You could almost say, like, the first book is A New Hope, the second book is Empire Strikes Back, and the third book is like Return of the Jedi. It would be it's actually quite a nice and easy way to identify them, to be honest. You have that dip in the middle where it looks like the bad guys are taking back everything, and then all of a sudden you have the rise of the conquering hero again. So
that is so exciting. Do you anticipate at the end of each book that you might list the names, kind of like a bibliography of the books that you use as reference, to maybe nudge or encourage people to read the same source material?
I think for legal reasons I'm going to have to anyway.
Oh, all right.
But that's where I hope my YouTube channel comes in, because I've actually received in the last sort of couple of months some fantastic books that I want to review on there, and I want to show people. So I'd like to think that that's where that comes in. Also, the plan for the first book, because the first book concentrates a lot on his life growing up in Victorian London, my plan is to have probably, I don't know how it will work, but I would like to, like, when you see a lot of these books you get from museums or some comics, I've seen it where the front cover folds out. The front cover's actually got a panel inside that folds out. I'd love to know if I could do that, and inside that, in that part, would be a Victorian map of London.
Oh, neat.
From points on it. That number 1 is his house he grew up in with his mum before his father left. Number 2 is, this particular point. Number 3 is where his mother was in the theatre. Number 4 is where he met Stan Laurel for the first time. Like these, I'd like to have that, but again, it's budget, and it's if it can be done. I mean, that'd be something I'd love to look into.
Wow. Yeah, I bet it's doable. I mean, fold-out covers have been done before. I don't see why not. That's pretty sweet. Let me see here. Now, I don't know if I heard right, but did you say your great uncle actually had interactions with Charlie Chaplin?
Yeah, but they were very small. I mean, and it was more of a case. I think my great uncle was like 8 or 9, and Charlie was 6.
Oh,
So they were in the same workhouse. They're actually sat in this. There's a picture owned by the Chaplin estate. They're actually sat like 2 or 3 rows away from each other in this picture. So it's a visual representation, and it's quite weird because I look at that little boy, and everyone that sees the picture actually says, "My God, he looks like your brother." So there's still a family resemblance now of this little boy growing up in Victorian London to my brother, which is crazy.
wow. Yeah, I was asking because I was just curious as to whether he might have possibly left behind any journals that might have recounted parts of his life, including those brief interactions.
I mean, we don't have anything, and we didn't know until I started looking up my family history that this person even existed. There were stories about like certain different relatives and things, but the problem is with growing up in South London, where Chaplin grew up. A lot of people have got stories about, oh yeah, my dad used to shine his shoes. Oh, he used to buy his steak from my uncle's butchers and stuff like this. But everybody had a story to cling on to. So you was obviously and understandably quite sceptical of
Right, sure.
But it was only until I found like legitimate hard evidence that this address that this person lived in was owned by my family at the same time, and then sort of the relationship. But again, a very high percentage of working class people back then could not read and write. I mean, Chaplin didn't learn to read and write till he was about 14, 15. So there wouldn't have been anything that would have really survived anyway. I mean, the photo pretty much is all that we've got.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered that part of it. Not being able to read and write, not being very common in those times. Who did the artwork in the banner of your YouTube channel?
Oh, that is, I'm going to give a massive credit to the one and only Peter Gilmore, who I literally said, Peter, can you help me? I need something cool and funky for my YouTube channel and my Twitter. And he went, yeah, give me a couple of days. And then actually he did it pretty quickly, did it quicker than a couple of days. It was incredible. And it's absolutely, I love it. Actually, I didn't even say to him. How it started was a friend of mine. So the thing of Chaplin and me sat next to each other, that's a photo that one of my friends many years ago photoshopped and put on a birthday card for me. So I'm sat somewhere and like the real picture, the real photograph of Chaplin, like they superimpose us next to each other. And I was doing something, and when Peter had said to me, oh, what are you thinking? What are you looking for? I sent him that picture on the front of that card and went, can you do anything with this? And he redrew it. And what you see on my YouTube channel is his fantastic work. So anyone in the chat, please go and back Rocket Girl if you haven't, and also go and sub to Super Dead with Mandy Summers and Peter Gilmore, because they 100% deserve it. And especially, you know, like I say, that, you know, his work and her enthusiasm are everywhere. My banner on there is Peter's. I stream with the CG ladies every single Saturday. So, you know, we're a nice interlinked community.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Is the background the British flag?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, cool. I thought so. Yeah, I like it a lot. It's eye-catching, and it gets the point across, and it's straightforward.
Yeah.
And that's really all you need, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think so as well.
With regards to your crowdfunding, does the estate of Charlie Chaplin have any kind of like stipulations or restrictions on how much freedom you have to do, and like perks wise?
Well, for legal reasons, I don't feel I'm going to too much. But the one thing that they sort of said, you know, to be honest, my contract is pretty. What's the right phrase? There's a lot of common sense attached to it. Right. In the fact of, you know, don't make him look like Adolf Hitler. Don't make his life like badly sensationalized. Use actual historical evidence. Don't get too artistic with the truth, and make it as realistic and believable as possible. And I don't think that even goes for the art style. I mean, if I'd have gone for a really like an anime, manga art style, but told the same story, I don't even think they would have had an issue with that. They did say to me that they wanted something a bit more realistic, but I was going for that style anyway. So.
Yeah, so it's going to be realistic as well as historically accurate, right?
Yeah. Oh, if nothing else, it will be historically accurate because I won't have it any other way. It has to be that way.
Yep. Have you ever been invited by the estate to like tour or check out some of the private estate collection?
Yeah, I've got complete access to the archives for this book. I've also been to his home twice in Switzerland, which is now a museum. I've done various talks and things in different silent film festivals for the Chaplin estate, as well as doing things for various other festivals they've endorsed. I wrote, so I've done a lot around. They, like I say, they know me very well.
Fantastic. And you said you've already been thinking about perks and stretch goals for your book.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. You're aware of Cecil's Cash Grab.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know that he's got that intro video.
Mm-hmm.
I think is it Scotty Davis Studios?
I believe so. Yeah.
Have you thought about maybe having as an intro video like a cartoon intro, but in the art style of the book, as well as it being like a silent film?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in communication with various different, it's Ascension Cinema who did Ethan's Cyberfrog fan trailer. I've been speaking to them about different things. They're also incredibly huge Chaplin fan. So it is going to be something I'm going to consider. I do definitely want something like that on my campaign because I think that these trailers, when they're professionally done, they can really add to your campaign, and I think that they also create a certain level of professionalism with it as well.
Agreed.
So yeah, it's definitely going to be. So I want it to be as professionally looking as possible, and if having something like that, then yeah, definitely.
Do you think there's any? You probably already thought of this too, but do you think there's a chance of including T-shirts as one of the perks?
It depends. I'd have to run that past the Chaplin estate because, again, without going into the legal wranglings of it all, it depends what merchandise they allow me.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so it could be it's a thing, especially if I own the images. But again, I wouldn't want to do anything without consulting them first.
And I don't know. I mean, I totally understand if you're not allowed to share this kind of information, but whenever you work with a franchise or an estate of a property, do they typically, because, I keep thinking about maybe there might be some IPs that are at the stage where they'll go, what's the term? Public.
Right, in public domain.
Public domain, that's it. When you work with an estate, and if you go to do a crowdfunded project, this was something I was considering asking your boy Zach as well. Does the estate want a cut of it as well?
You'll have to pay for any license. You're
already paying for the license. Does that usually entail that you're also going to expect to give them a cut of whatever the campaign earns?
Well, it depends on what you negotiate with whoever you speak to. I mean, some of them might want a flat out fee, others might want a percentage. It just depends what you come together with them for.
That's a good point. You mentioned you got a trading card in the works. Do do you anticipate having several trading cards?
It depends what happens along the campaign. I'd like to.
Like maybe one. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's all right. I mean, I'd like to. It depends what presents itself en route. It depends if someone comes forward and wants to do something, and I think that their style and what they want to do is going to enhance the campaign. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to definitely, and I really like the idea that Ethan and Mandy have done with their YouTube channels, where they've got the memberships and they've got things like the cards and stuff, because I think that there's some incredibly talented people within CG that they want a break by showing their skills and showcasing their skills, and I definitely would like to be able to reach out to them and say, look, I've seen some of your work on Twitter, or I've seen your drawing streams on YouTube, whatever. Would you like to do a card for this? Would you like to do an image for that? Statistical Zero is the greatest example of that I can think of. I mean, he must sit there for hours a week and just randomly draws people in CG, and they're always fantastic. Like I barely laugh at some of the ones that he creates. I know this, the CG UK guys all think he's incredible, and he's so the same as people that popped into the chat like Mayfield, and you have Wyatt and you have Cam. They just want to be entertained, drama-free CG with good comic. And you know what? That's exactly always been my message as well, because I have to be incredibly careful, because I am handling a very high-profile IP. I don't want drama to be following me around, and I also don't like it for myself. I like to be able to engage and interact with everybody, and so by doing that, I can showcase some fantastic artists within CG for things like trading cards, for things like postcard prints, that will get their names out there. Someone might be a member of my channel who's looking to do a book. They might get a trading card, see the name of the person on the back, and go, do you know what? I'm going to look this person up on Twitter. They've got exactly the right style to draw my comic book. And then you can go from there.
Yeah, most definitely. It's the way to go for sure. Do you anticipate being able to make it to the for the Fans Fest? For those of you who are new to ComicsGate, there's a lot of talk and some plans being made to have our very first fan-based convention called For the Fans Fest, tentatively scheduled to be May 2021 in Orlando, Florida, probably in renting a chunk of an apartment. I mean, not an apartment, but a hotel, and conference rooms or whatever, or ballrooms. Assuming everything opens back up in time due to the pandemic. It sounds like you would be well staged to attend such an event, since you'll be a creator. You could have your own table, sell your wares, and all that good stuff.
I have spoken to various different people about being there, and I've even spoken to Ethan about volunteering and helping out, because it is something that's quite passionate to me. I want to, I've got experience in doing that sort of thing, so I want to be part of Artist Alley, but I also wouldn't mind actually helping to support it on a wider level as well. So as far as I'm concerned, as long as there is no issue with a conflict of interest with my work, because obviously I'm still a professional person away from making a comic, I will totally, like both of us, Jan and I will both be there. It's just, it'll be, if I have to just be there the weekend, I will, but it's a long flight from London just to go to Florida for a weekend. But if I have to do it, I'll do it that way. It's not a problem.
Darn straight. I'm real excited about the prospect of going to it, even though I'm not yet a creator, a officially. And I meant to add that the For the Fans Fest is not only ComicsGate, but it's looking to also include Wii Wars and the Fandom Minutes. So you're talking about a potential huge fan base of all these different properties: movies, TV, cartoons, comic books, toys. So that's got me real excited.
Yeah, definitely.
Cam says, indeed, CG needs to be about entertainment. And then Statistical says, in certain areas, that is all CG is.
Mm-hmm. And that's the area that we try to be. But I am sadly going to have to wrap it up now because
I was about to say, it's time to get going now.
But thank you for having me, and thank you so much for, after I had to cut it short last time because of work, I'm really happy to have been back to be able to expand this a bit more. So, thank you so much.
And once again, did you say that your mailing list is planning on opening in 3 weeks?
Yeah, I'm going to put the exact date when I've sorted it out over the next couple of days up on my Twitter. And there will be progress images of different things going on my Twitter and my Instagram in the next couple of weeks as well.
Awesome.
So it's all Charlie's London. I mean, I think on Instagram I'm Charlie's London official as well, the same way I'm on YouTube, and that's not pretentious in any way. It's to do with the fact that there's another Charlie's London that is just a girl from London called Charlie who makes little videos about different family things, and I wouldn't want not only to lose subs because they're subbing to the wrong one, but I also wouldn't want her to suddenly get people subbing to her and she not understand why. So that's why I changed it to the official. But plus my comic's going to be called Charlie's London, so I thought that it made more sense to say that this is the official YouTube channel of Charlie's London.
Oh yeah, by all means. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So on YouTube, you're Charlie's London, and actually all your social media.
Yeah, you'll find me definitely. And now the avatar is the same on every single one. So.
Yeah, that's good for consistency.
Yeah, you'll find me. No worries about that.
Fantastic, and please like, comment, and subscribe to Charlie's London's social media.
Same as please do it to. For WyzGyz as well if you haven't already.
Thanks so very much. I'm at WyzGyz tweet on WyzGyz tweets on Twitter, and on YouTube I'm at WyzGyz Entertainment. Thank you all so very much for joining us today. You guys have been awesome. Hail chat, hail ComicsGate. Statistical says, great interview, guys. Couldn't click away.
Oh, thank you, Sato.
Can hope for anything more. Thank you all so much for your support, and keep up the great work, Charlie's London.
Thank you.
And we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, we definitely will. See you soon.
All right, take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.